everybody. It's Ashley Kolstad with Milton Public Library here for our segment of our Check Out MPL podcast, which is Travel with MPL. And today you're traveling with MPL to Australia. So this is going to go along with our travel kits that we put together. And we want to give a shout out to Wisconsin Humanities, who helped fund the creation of our travel kits and this podcast with a generous grant from them. So today, as you can probably already tell, we're going to be talking about Australia. And I have somebody that I'm related to, a cousin of mine, Brianna, joining us today because she has actually traveled to Australia. Welcome, Brianna.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited to hear all of your stories. So maybe you could start by introducing yourself and telling us when you went to Australia and why you went to Australia.
Yeah. So, as Ashley said, I'm Brianna. I live in Milwaukee right now, and I'm going to school to get my master's in public health. But when I was in Australia, it was when I was in college studying abroad, and I had always just kind of wanted to go to Australia. I'd been on I made a list of goals, and that was one of the top goals. And once I saw there was a program there through my school, I had to go. So I was there from July, the end of July to basically mid-December of 2018. So quite a long time. And yeah, most of that I was studying, but a lot of times I was also traveling. So yeah.
Nice. Did they have a program there that was part of your studies, or was it just kind of it was an opportunity and available?
Yeah, I think it was actually an exchange. I don't know if it was a one-to-one exchange, but I think from what I understand, I actually never really verified it, but I'm pretty sure with that program there could have also been Australian students coming to my campus.
Oh, sure.
I don't think necessarily someone comes and they swap, but I think it's just an exchange program that you could go on. Fun. As yeah. So it was basically it was a program. I didn't have to just choose it for myself. It was already built into the study abroad program. So
cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so then when you were living in Australia, where were you living?
Yes, I was in Sydney. Actually, it was just outside of Sydney. It was in a suburb, which is actually, I was a little bit surprised by that because based on the information they gave me before I went, I thought it was going to be kind of closer to the city. I knew it wasn't going to be right in the city center, right. But it was actually more like a 40-minute train ride. And then unfortunately, halfway through the semester, they closed the train station. So it was an hour and a half bus ride. So it was pretty far, but also close enough that I could still explore the city. So in the pictures I'm showing right now, this was my first time going into the city, the CBD, the city business district, to the Opera House and the Sydney Harbor. So yeah, that's both of these pictures are. And
okay.
And right next to the Opera House is it's a nice little easy day trip. You do that, and then you can go to the Botanical Garden. So I think they're called the Royal Botanical Gardens or something like that. I actually don't have any pictures of that, but if you ever go to Sydney, that's right there. It's definitely something you can do at the same time. So yeah, that was cool.
It looks gorgeous.
Yeah, it was the Sydney Harbor was. I could have stared at it all day, I think, from multiple locations.
Right. I probably could too. So when you were staying in the suburb of Sydney, you were staying with international students, or were you able to mingle with the locals? How did that work out for you?
So I was staying in basically a dorm on campus. It was they called it a college. It was kind of it was affiliated with the university, but it also was kind of its own organization. So there definitely was international students there, but I did live with a lot of Australian students as well. So I'd met that was probably where I met a majority of the Australian students that I did meet. Yeah, but there were some international students there as well. So both for sure. Yeah.
So were your experiences with the native Australians fairly positive?
Yeah, I would say we had a lot of fun. I think like
Yeah,
yeah, it was like those weren't a lot of like the people that I still talk to are like I didn't make close friends with them, but and I think that was because I went during their spring semester, and so it was
sure.
like they had already started, they had already kind of a lot because a lot of people that I lived with were like first years, but they had already kind of established their friend groups, and like so then it was like the international students who came in, we kind of more mingled with each other just because we were all new. But overall, I did have a lot of fun with when I did hang out with the Australian students. We would like um, go dancing together and stuff like that.
Oh, fun. That sounds so
Yeah,
much fun.
yeah.
So then, well, I know this because I talked to you outside of work about this, but you've been able to travel in other locations other than Sydney then
Yes,
with your time there.
I did. Well, first there are just in line with the pictures. There are some
Sure.
other cool things within Sydney that I got to do.
Mm-hmm.
So on the left here is me at a kite festival at Bondi Beach, so like the pretty famous beach in Sydney. And
Right.
then on the right, I took a surf lesson at another sort of more popular beach, but it's called Manly. You might not have I'd never heard of it before I went there, but it's a pretty popular beach in like a cool little neighborhood in Sydney. Um, so yeah, you can go. There's numerous beaches all around, like in the Sydney area, like literally in the city. But yeah, so those are like kind of like the two biggest ones, and so those were fun things that I did there.
Nice.
Um, yeah, and then from Sydney, it's like the easiest place that you can travel to a lot of other places in the country. So first, this is kind of like a day trip that I took. It was a 3-hour train ride, like the public transport, like the train that shut down, like halfway
Yeah.
through. It didn't shut down that way, just like the opposite direction, unfortunately, into the city. But going this way, the opposite
Oh.
direction, I could take the 3-hour train ride to the Blue Mountains, is what they're called. It's like a just this. It's pretty touristy, like the spot where I went on this first trip. I took several trips there,
Okay.
but it was like a beautiful day trip, and it was like the formations are kind of cut off, but like in this first picture, this is called the Three Sisters. It's like a rock formation, and then there's just like a bunch of beautiful forest in that area that I took like walk through to see this waterfall, and then the overlooks were like breathtaking. So that was really cool, like an easy like and cheap, honestly, because it was just for the cost of public transportation, basically, unless you stayed overnight, which you could do. I didn't do that because you could do a lot of the touristy things just in like a day and then go back on the train like for like $3 or whatever the price is. So that was
Yeah.
a really good, like cool thing to do from Sydney. Um, but then of course there's so many other sites to see in Australia. So I took a long trip.
Okay.
My semester ended in November. It was like mid-November or something. And since by then at home, the semester was still going, the fall semester, I was like, well, what am I gonna do? Just go home and like sit around? Why I might as well stay in Australia and do some
Right.
traveling. Yeah. So I actually did a month-long trip on the east coast of Australia, which is like kind of like a popular like sort of backpackers place to travel. And so like there's lots of sights to see. And so I could there's so many pictures that I have, but these are kind of like just some highlights to show what I did. So on this side, it's just I did a canoeing trip on this just in like a just in the jungle, basically. Like in the northern part of Australia, it's very like it's not a jungle, it's a rainforest. And so it's really hot and like but also really beautiful, so that was cool. And then in the middle, this is a picture of something that I took of the Great Barrier Reef. I don't know what this animal is, or like if I think it's a giant clam or something like that, but I thought it was cool. It's like if you can't, I mean, obviously the picture is pretty bad, but it's like blue on the inside. It was just very beautiful, and like
Yeah.
everything the Great Barrier Reef is pretty, even though some of it is bleaching, which is unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
I still got to see some of the better parts of it, which was really nice. I took like a day boat tour where we got to go out and like go snorkeling. I even got to do an introductory scuba dive, which was really
Ooh.
cool. Yeah, like it was like an hour or something, or like even maybe it was even shorter than that, like half an hour. And I had to like stay hooked on to my instructor, but it was super cool. I'd never gone scuba diving before, and so that was like a really cool opportunity to do
Yeah.
in the Great Barrier Reef, nonetheless. So that was awesome.
Was the Great Barrier Reef like super busy? Because in my head, I imagine it being like very touristy.
Well, it definitely is, but like you have to basically do a tour, or like that was the only way I like when I like booked my trip through like a travel agency, and basically the only way you can get to it is if you have a boat. So
Hmm.
I think the tours kind of maybe had their own areas, because like when I was there, I don't remember that, like maybe there was a couple other boats like at the spot we were at. Um and I didn't really look into like the best places on the reef to go. I just sort of like went with the one that the travel agency booked for me. So I'm like, I'm not, there might have been like other more busy places, but the place I was, it wasn't actually like yeah, it wasn't super like full of people. It was just like mainly my tour, and I think maybe one or two other tours were around that same area at the same time.
Hmm,
Well,
interesting.
yeah, it was like it is kind of unexpected, because I know a lot of people like it's like the probably one of the main things they do when they go to Australia.
Right,
So
that's what I was thinking.
yeah, so definitely worth it though. Definitely, especially if it continues bleaching, you got to get yourself to the Great Barrier Reef to see
Right.
it before it dies or
Well,
whatever.
I'm gonna have to book my tickets now
Yes.
when we can still travel.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so then this last picture I took at the Whitsunday Islands, which is just like this pretty like white sand beach, blue water chain of islands on the East Coast. And I actually had a like a 3-day sailboat tour during there. So I like slept on the boat. And we also did some more snorkeling in the Great Barrier Reef, because that was like kind of more, it was down more south from the first picture, but it still was within the Great Barrier Reef. So that was also really cool. But then the islands themselves were just absolutely stunning. Like just from this one picture, I think it's easy to tell, but like it was fun sleeping on a sailboat for 2 nights or whatever. It was really like I slept in this like tiny little bed. Like there was like 4 people in this one section, and there's like a bed was probably like a 1.5 to 2 feet wide, and then it was just like I mean, I'm like pretty tall, and I was like ducking under, but it was still really fun. Like hearing, like I was like listening to like the waves at night. I don't know. I've never experienced anything like that before, so it was like really cool experience on
Yeah,
that.
that sounds amazing to me.
Yeah,
And you didn't get seasick at all?
I didn't actually, because okay, well, it was a sailboat, but most of the time the sails weren't out. It was like motorized,
Okay,
so
okay.
and we were like within the island, so it wasn't like super wavy. It
Mm.
wasn't like far out in the ocean. So yeah, I actually did it, and I was kind of expecting that maybe I would feel a little sick, but I actually didn't at all. So that was
Well,
good.
that's good.
Yeah. um. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So
Well, yes, I was going to ask you about the
yeah.
food.
Well, so most of the time the food that I had was like pretty similar to the food environment in the US, because it's
Hmm.
like pretty similar. But I had a few cool unique experiences with the food, and the first one on the left, I took a trip to Tasmania as well. So it's like it was like an 8-day trip, and Tasmania is like an island state on the southern part of Australia. They called it, I don't know who, I heard it like once or twice, they referred to it as like the New Zealand of Australia. And it's definitely not anything like New Zealand. It's beautiful, but like I also took a trip to New Zealand during that time, and it's not the same really, but
No.
it's definitely more Australian, like culture wise and stuff. But so I'm actually like not a big seafood eater, but like while I was in Tasmania, they have like apparently like some of the like clearest water. That's what they told me on the tour. It was like a clearest, like this one bay or whatever. And so on this trip we got like one free oyster that they had just like picked that morning. So I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna try this oyster, and I actually really enjoyed it. It was just like a fun like experience to have. And then
Yeah.
the second picture is my last day there, my very last day before I flew out. I was back in Sydney after my month-long trip because I started more north and traveled back down. And I was actually traveling with someone from England, and she was staying, but I was leaving. So I'm like, let's just like celebrate this last day that I'm here. And we were in this other cool part of Sydney, which I also recommend. It's called The Rocks. It's actually also pretty close to the Opera House. It's like the oldest part of Sydney, so it has like cobblestone streets and some like older cool buildings. So we went to this like cool pub. I can't remember the name of it, but it had this pizza which had like 3 different Australian animals on it. So it had crocodile, kangaroo, and emu. So
Emu
like
too. Wow.
yeah. So it was like an interesting way for me to like send myself off. I was like, let's just do this interesting pizza on my last day. And it was tasty. I couldn't really differentiate between the 3 different animals, but it tasted good. As I remember that. Yeah.
It's probably more palatable to eat it presented as a pizza rather than like cuts of meat.
Oh, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if I would have tried it.
But kangaroo, maybe we said this before, but kangaroo are I've read a lot about how like people do eat them there, and like how it's like not like, to us it sounds strange, but like to them it's very normal.
Yeah, so the way I would sort of describe that is they're like all around, kind of even a bit not invasive, because they're not obviously invasive. They're like more annoying, I guess the word is, just like maybe like a deer would be in Wisconsin. Like they're everywhere, and they like cross the road, like intercept traffic, like that sort of thing. So like once I knew that, I was like, oh, then it's probably not that weird to eat kangaroo, because like, like just if they're like kind of being menaces, it might even just be better to like decrease the population. I can't remember if they said they were overpopulated or not, but just like that was their comparison. I think someone told me that they were like that, and I'm like, oh, kind of like this. Like I live in Wisconsin, it's kind of like these deer, and they're like, oh yeah, you could say that. Like
yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Also a cool story, to tell people.
So I think this was a place that I visited on the East Coast that was like it's just like an interesting story that I wanted to share. Is like an unexpected day. It was called Magnetic Island, and like I said, I booked like a travel agency, and like most of my tour, like most places I stopped, like I had a tour, but this place I didn't. It just was like a day, or I think we slept on the island, so it was like a day on the island. I was like, okay, I don't really know what's there, because it was just like a stop that they had on like most of their itinerary. So I'm like, okay, might as well do it. And it ended up being like a really cool day. So since we didn't have a tour, the person I was traveling with and I, we rented this car, which was like stick shift, like super old, like 4-wheel drive, like, and we just kind of like drove around the island for a day, and we just like stopped at places that we thought was cool. So like that took us to this one, I can't remember if it was like a zoo or like a conservatory kind of thing, but then I got to hold this koala and the snake. Yeah. And obviously I've never held a koala, so that was cool. But then I've also never held a snake before, and so I was like, I'm gonna do it. Like I'd heard about all the scary snakes in Australia. Actually, like oddly enough, I like didn't really like fully internalize all the crazy animals that are there before I went. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, there's this spider that if you get bit, like or like all these snakes that are super venomous. And I'm like, okay, well, whatever. And I'm like, let's just hold this snake. This one was not venomous. I can't remember what kind of snake it was, but like,
it's large.
Yeah. And then another thing we got to do on the island was there was like a spot where there was known to see like wild koalas, which is hard to see because first of all, they're endangered, but also they only kind of are found on the specific eucalyptus tree, and like there's a bunch of different types of eucalyptus trees. So on this island, somehow this is like where they kind of had a spot where they lived, and so that's what's in this picture. I actually think the one in that picture is a baby. It's hard to tell because it's like really zoomed in, but there were like, as like a couple koalas in that tree, and there was definitely like some adults and some babies. So that was really
adorable.
Cool. Yeah.
And was
really
the koala soft? So for everybody listening, they're gonna want to know.
It was like, it wasn't like super soft like a bunny, but it was like, it wasn't rough. So it was like somewhere in between.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
They also only let us hold this koala must have been like, I think it had been out taking pictures for a while when I got there. And so they were only letting us hold it for like, it was like literally like 10 seconds. Like, like snap a few pictures and give it back because they wanted to give it a rest. I'm like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. So I didn't really get to like touch it too much. So but I do remember it not being super soft, but not like rough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you were saying that like this trip to Magnetic Island was maybe like something that was really surprising for you that happened while you were traveling there?
Yeah. So
yeah, go ahead.
On that day, there was like a big storm that rolled in, and obviously the car we were driving around didn't have a top, so we had to just like park it under this overhang and then kind of wait for the storm to go out. And it was like afternoon, like getting to evening. But we had heard, we being me and the British girl I was traveling with, that there was this cool like point at the end of the island where it was really fun to watch the sunset. So we were like, okay, if this storm stops at this time, we're gonna go to that point. And it ended up stopping, and I think there was like a break. So we're like, it was like the opposite end of the island from where we were. So we tried to like, we kind of like we were zooming there as fast as we could. And then we were driving down this dirt road to get to it. And all of a sudden there's like this dog that was like kind of like staying in front of our car and just like looking back at us kind of nervous. And I was like, well, today's just like, I've done all this crazy stuff. Might as well pick up this dog. We weren't sure if it was going to be nice or not, but like it ended up being super sweet. We like put it in the back of the car and like stopped at some of the people who lived on that road. And we're like, do you know whose dog this is? And we're like, oh yeah, I think our neighbor was like looking for their dog. So we like returned the dog. I didn't put a picture in, but she was very, very cute. And the owner was like, oh yeah, she ran away because of the storm. Thank you so much for bringing her back.
Oh.
And so that was kind of cool. And then by that time it was getting kind of dark. So we like rushed to the end of the island and got to the point right before the sunset happened. And it was just like a cool sort of experience. It was like the storm clouds were kind of still like rolling away, and it was like a completely orange sunset, and we had just had that like whole day of like experiences. And I was not expecting that on that day because of not having a tour, like not having any sort of structure. So yeah, I really enjoyed that day, even though it was kind of like on the whim.
Yeah.
So that was, yeah.
Was there something that maybe you had high expectations for when you went to Australia, and then like after having experienced it, you were kind of like, oh, that wasn't as awesome as I thought it was going to be? If not, that's okay, but I thought I would ask.
There wasn't a lot. The only thing I would say is like, just like, you have to go to the opera house, but like I feel like I went to it so many times, I'm like, oh, it's just there again. But like, I don't know, that's definitely not like some, I would say still go to it, because it would especially be cool if you could like go to a show, or like I got to see it at night from like the harbor on like a boat too. So it's definitely not something that's like, I would say, I don't know, it's not like overrated. It's just like a one and done type thing. There's other things that you should see, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does.
Yeah.
That's how I felt about Machu Picchu. I said, go there one time, but maybe that's enough. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be for that. That would be nice. The Sydney Opera House, which is cool though. It was still cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you have any like tips you would want to give people who might be traveling to Australia?
Yeah. So my main tip would be to sort of go off the beaten path. And so one of the reasons why I went there to Australia specifically is because I really love hiking. And I knew I'd kind of have the opportunity to do that. Like even in Sydney, there was some opportunity. So like definitely go see like the popular tourist things, but also try to make time to do like something that's like not as popular. So like, for example, these pictures that I have were just from this hike I did. Like it was like 2 stops from my train station, like up more away from Sydney. There's like this long trail called the Great Walk. I think that's what it's called in Australia. It's like if you do the whole thing, you can do like a multi-week or like even a month, couple months long trip. But I just did like a small portion of it because it was like really accessible from the spot.
Mhm.
And I went with one of my friends, and on that day we saw some really cool wildlife. So in this first picture, it's kind of hard to see, but like right to the left of the rock is an echidna, which is like it looks kind of like a hedgehog. It's like
Yeah.
black and yellow hedgehog. It's like yeah, basically an Australian hedgehog, I guess you could say that. But they're like kind of hard to like, you don't really see them that much. So like me and my friend were like, wow, that's so cool that we just kind of like stumbled across this echidna on this hiking trail that's like you can still like hear the road basically like from it. Like we weren't far from a city at all. And then on this page, in this picture, you can see kookaburra, which is like, it's probably something that everyone's heard of, like the cool bird in Australia. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a song, I think, with the kookaburra in it.
Yeah. I can't think of how it goes. I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Like a nursery rhyme or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we just saw it in the wild. It was really cool.
Oh.
Yeah. So that was like one of my off the beaten path experiences. This was another one. This is also in the Blue Mountains, but I took 2 trips there. The first picture I showed was like the first trip where I like really did the touristy stuff. The second time I went, I did like some of the more or like the less popular stuff. So this one, I can't remember what the trail is called. It was on like the other side. There's like, or maybe it's a few stops even up further. I can't remember exactly where it was, but it was like not as busy because you had to walk down and then back up a bunch of stairs, like down, then do the trail and then go back up to do it. And I thought I didn't think I was going to make it on the way back up, but I did. But like, this is within the trail. It was like this really pretty, just like foresty trail. And then on the end is when you saw some more of the overlook of the Blue Mountains. But yeah, I thought this was just like this little pretty like creek crossing just like in the woods that I was exploring. So that was really cool. And it's just like, I mean, like I always thought the eucalyptus trees were super cool, and they're obviously everywhere in the forest. So just like seeing those everywhere, and then all like the other like plants, and I don't think I saw any wildlife that day, but yeah, it was just beautiful. That it was, I don't think I met maybe one other person, me and my friend who I went with met on the trail. Maybe not, I can't even remember. It might not even have been anyone, but it was like very unpopulated, which was very different from where it was before the first trip. So that was cool.
Yeah. It looks beautiful. Someplace I would like enjoy hiking.
Yes, it was definitely a really cool hike. And then this is also at the Blue Mountains. Slightly more populated than the last picture, but still less populated than the first. It's like the trail was to see these falls on the side, which is called Wentworth Falls. And again, you had to walk down a bunch of stairs to see it. So it was like somewhere between like 700 and 1,000 stairs, something like that, like a ton.
Yeah.
So it was, I mean, we met more people that day, but definitely a lot less than there was at like the overlook in the other spot. And then we also got this view, which was like, it was super cool. It was like foggy that day and still really like beautiful, like the rocks, yeah. So definitely my tip would be to try to find places that are like not in all the tours. Yeah. But go to those too. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Australia seems to have so many amazing things to offer that like you want to see everything, right?
Yes.
But maybe you don't have all the time.
No, I definitely still didn't even have all the time to see I didn't get to go to the outback during my time there, and also the west coast of Australia is supposed to be really cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot to see there. Yeah.
So you would definitely recommend anybody to travel to Australia, it sounds
Oh
like.
yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Beware of all the snakes and spiders and
Right, right.
even like plants that can hurt you. But yeah, go there. Like for
Yeah,
sure.
and do you maybe have plans to return?
Not like, I mean, eventually I will go
Right.
back. Yeah, but nothing like yet. But it's in
Yeah,
there. I'll be back there for sure one day.
nice. Okay, well, thank you so
Yes.
much for sharing with us your experiences in Australia. Um, and at this point, I would want to refer people to our Travel with MPL Australia kit, where you can get travel books. You can get a beautiful landscape book with all of the landscapes, and I'm sure the Blue Mountains are in there.
Mhm.
Um, some books or some documentaries about the outback and the reef, maps and things like that that you can check out from Milton Public Library. Thank you again, Brianna,
Yeah.
um, for visiting with us, and that's all we've got for you today.